Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a great day. So first, to start off, this episode is going to be mainly focusing on the dynamic in World War One. I think that this is, especially for authoritarian governments, this is a very crucial time and apex for the empires. If you look at the borders in World War One, you'd see empires across the board in almost every section of Europe. And after that, you see not really an empire, but more of a dictatorship that rise up after the World War One. So how does this switch from a primarily Egyptian school of thought Europe to a French school of thought Europe? How does that occur? Well, it occurs like most things done in the satisfaction or lack of it in the people. For the vast majority of Europe, people have not been satisfied, but they've never really thought of the concept of not having a king. This is reinforced by the fact, way back in the 1530s, we've kind of already went past this period, but Tsar Ivan III of Russia left in exile because he knew the people were so bent on having a czar. There's no way that they could imagine a Russia without a czar. So they needed a czar. So if he stepped down, then who's gonna be the czar? They couldn't process that like idea of not having a czar. So and they did go back to him, and that's how he got more power. He said, "I will come back if you give me all these rights," and they did because they needed a czar. Period. And that was a very brilliant move on his part, and he used that extra power to partly reform, but also kind of take in more power to the government. So, but it is a great example of how brainwashed you could say these people were, always believing that they need an authoritarian ruler. This is the central belief in basically every authoritarian government of school of thought, from except really for Greek, but Greek's the outlier for everything. So, how does the change between a Egyptian to French, how does that happen? So, first of all, we have to examine the situation in World War One. Russia and France and the UK are on the Entente, the Allies, the America side of the war. The majority of these powers are, in fact, nations that have more democratic practices instead of authoritarian practices. Then on the other side, you see, initially at the beginning of the war, Italy, Austria Hungary, and Germany. Although they're smaller in landmass, they are definitely a lot bigger in population size, and also they are bigger in industry. They have a lot more guns that they're producing compared to someone like the Russians. So the war breaks out, and it's not. It's kind of an oxymoron, in my opinion, that a war of empires was also the war to end all empires, or not end all empires, but it definitely ended a lot of empires for certain, more than your average war. So, but specifically the atrocity of war that hasn't been seen in 99 years. Think about that. The last war, major power war, up to this point, was the Napoleonic Wars. This was 99 years ago. So, everyone's had the time to rebuild, repopulate, and now they're fresh and ready to go to war again. 99 years, though, is something we haven't ever seen before. Even still today, World War II was not 99 years ago. It would be 99 years ago if we managed to last until 2030. Ooh, I guess it would be 2038. That's when how long we'd have to last. So that's still a very significant amount of time from when I'm recording this. So, and 99 years is such a milestone that we've never seen before. And it really just shows how, I guess you could say, scared people were initially to go to war, and then they were just focused so much more on external European affairs and getting bigger. So we see this situation where the biggest empires ever seen before have the biggest armies ever seen before, and now they're fighting each other. But the way they're fighting each other is extremely unique, especially for, well, any time. We've only seen this a couple times. This is, of course, trench warfare. Literal trenches running across the entire front, western and eastern front. Of course, there's less in the eastern front because they couldn't afford as much. But specifically in the western front, we see a lot of destruction, especially in France and Germany. A lot of stuff. And in these are trenches. But the atrocity of trench warfare. There's a famous poem, I forget the exact Latin frame, but it translates to, "It is fair and honorable," around that. Proper and honorable to die for one's country. This could not be truer, or this could not seem more wrong when you're conscripted in the army and go off to fight in the frontline trenches, where you have to deal with disease, you have to deal with rainfall, trench foot, you're going to have to deal with constant shell shock, you're going to have to constantly deal with bombers overhead blowing everything you know up. You're going to feel a lot of shell shock. And even if you're not, let's say you're female and you're working in a factory, you're going to have to work longer hours, you're going to have to do less stuff that you enjoy, you're going to have to spend so much time and yourself into this war that you're not even exactly sure why you're fighting for. When the people get dissatisfied, no matter the government type, it's so much harder to win a war, especially when the government is democratic. The people are the ones that decide if the war is winnable or not. Now, for this environment to occur, you can see the dissatisfaction among everyone in every aspect of it, especially under the empires, because they're the ones putting up the hours a lot more than they can, or more than their people can afford. So the dissatisfaction comes, and when it does come, it strikes very highly, and it causes for massive German sentiment out. I'm specifically German here because that's where the example is going to lead. But they still believe that they're not, maybe they're thinking that, they don't need a Kaiser, but they do need a strong government. Somehow. People at this time are still looking towards authoritarian governments to tell them what to do, because they don't feel like they're powerful enough to make the decisions for themselves. And especially the very small period where we did see Germany go into a democratic period here, this of course being the Weimar Republic, it had to deal with both far left extreme communist to far right extreme fascist. There's conflict between the two, and of course the people in the center are just trying to keep the country alive. And then Hindenburg gives in to demands, and then allows for the leader of the Third Reich, Adolf Hitler, to rise up and take control of Germany. And he then would go on to do the Anschluss and say that it's in the name of the German people. Now, what has motivated him to believe that he was the savior of Germany? People aren't still so sure. However, mainly people think that it was his time that he was spent homeless on the streets of Vienna when he didn't feel like he had a purpose in his life. No matter what justification in his head he gave himself for having power, he was still an extreme believer in the idea of a superiority in race. And this would lead for him to do atrocities that the world has never seen up to this point. And he did it under the justification that I am in power because I am doing what's right for the people. Considering that he was massacring large parts of his population, this is for sure what's not right for the people. Now, of course, Mussolini would do the same thing too. But and I know Mussolini was before Germany, but Germany was, of course, had the more manpower and had the more stronger army, so that's the example that mainly people give. However, we often forget about a third major tyrant in this degree of time period. This, of course, being Joseph Stalin. I think this is a great part to leave it off. I think we got through a lot. I also don't think I said any filler words. So I think that's a new first. But this was a good one. I thought it got a lot out of the way. And next time, I think probably when I hit 10 episodes, I'll probably like do a little video explaining where the channel's going. Thank you and goodbye.